Squid Game broke my heart. It made me angry. It made me despair. It made me hopeful. In short, Squid Game ran the gamut of emotions. It is not a program to be taken lightly unless of course you are either somewhat sociopathic or so desensitized by the grind of daily existence that you would be able to empathize with the people who started it in the first place. People have been talking about almost nothing else for what seems like ages now, and my partner finally put her foot down and said, "We are watching Squid Game now." Which was a consequence of me putting it off for days because I had so many things to catch up on already. And I'm really glad she did because it was well worth interrupting everything just to watch what is one of the best programs I have watched in quite a while. I've heard it described as something of a dystopian nightmare, and while I will agree with the nightmare part, I don't agree that it's dystopian. I think instead, it is a vision of just how the class system looks when viewed from the bottom. There are a variety of classes. You have the lower struggling class that live day to day, some of which have no hope for and no chance of a better life. In this class, there are those who have either through folly or circumstance ended up with crushing debts, which make them prime candidates for the people who run the Squid Game. Then you have the middle class that live comfortable lives. But even here, there are some who have made mistakes and found themselves with huge debts that they can't pay, and so they too are candidates for Squid Game. Then you have the elites, who are immune to this kind of problem, as they revel in their riches and their immunity from the suffering and problems of their lower class counterparts. It is a harsh lesson about how even with our current Western free market economies that have lifted more people out of poverty than ever before and given everyone a chance at a better life, if they either work hard enough or have a bit of luck, there is still a dark side. A world that most people are lucky enough to have either not encountered at all, or after a brief brush, have managed to get themselves back onto an even keel. And that is the world we see in Squid Game. People at their lowest ever fighting to survive against the backdrop of the survival of the fittest nature of society in its current iteration. The main character, Seong-gyung, is a victim of this circumstance. He is poor, owes a lot of money to loan sharks and lives with his mother, who he borrows money from so that he can get a present and take his daughter out for her birthday. His daughter lives with her mother, who has divorced Gyeon and now has a new successful husband. We are told at the start of the first episode that he is a gambler, and so we're led to believe that the reason his life is a mess is because of a gambling addiction. We even see him use the money his mother gave him to bet on a horse racing so that he can take his daughter out somewhere fancy instead of for cheap fried chicken, which is what she really wants, as she is not allowed unhealthy foods at home. And when he is lucky and actually does win a lot of money gambling, he has the bad luck to meet his loan sharks, who chase him, and while trying to escape he runs into a girl who picks his pocket. This girl, named Kang Sae-byuk, is also going to be part of the Squid Game. She is a North Korean defector who has escaped with her brother, but whose mother is still stuck up in North Korea, and she lost a very large amount of money when she was conned by people who said they could help. Gyeon gets caught by the loan sharks, who want their money. He tries to pay them off with his winnings, but then discovers the money is gone. And it was Kang Sae-byuk who must have stolen it, although he doesn't know her name at this point, and he has no reason to believe they will ever meet again. The loan shark forces him to sign a document that essentially means that if he doesn't pay him back within a month, he can sell one of Gyeon's kidneys, and then if that isn't enough, he'll sell one of his eyes. In the end, he manages to take his daughter out for fried chicken, but his story belies what is in fact just a run of bad luck rather than the hinted at gambling problems. 10 years before, he had worked for a car manufacturer, but that went out of business. After that, he opened a chicken shop, but that failed. Then he opened a snack bar, and that failed. And his wife divorced him and he lost his daughter. And these are just two of the stories out of 456 people forced by desperation to take part in Squid Game. All of them receive a visit from a man who plays a simple game with them. In the case of Gyeon, he meets a well-dressed man on a train platform who asks him to play a game which entails, throwing an envelope at another envelope which is on the floor, and you have to try and flip over the other envelope with your envelope. I can't even describe that without sounding like an idiot. Just watch this clip. The guy offers him 100,000 won if he can win the game, which sounds a lot, but it is actually only about $85 or £62. But for Gyeon, it is a lifesaver, as his job as a chauffeur does not pay very well. He wins the game and the man tells him he can make much more money than that if he comes and plays some other games, and he gives him a card with a phone number. This is a precursor to the start of Squid Game, and from here on in, it gets pretty gruesome and heartrending. But before I get started, please consider subscribing, as that would really help me out, and if you like this content, give it a like. Okay, on with the review. Now we come to the main event, the nitty-gritty, Squid Game itself. We start with the voluntary kidnapping because the players are not allowed to know how to get to Squid Game, so they call a number on the card given to them, and they're told a pickup location. They are met by a shadowy figure driving a minivan who drugs them using gas, then drives them to a mysterious location. After this, the contestants wake up in beds in a big hall wearing different clothes and minus any personal possessions, such as mobile phones, so they are isolated from the rest of the world. And they are met by more silent figures, wearing red overalls with strange masks that have either a circle, a triangle, or a square, denoting the rank of the mask wearer, circle being the lowest and square being the highest. The players are confused and wonder what it is all about, and are understandably concerned about what is happening. A square mask explains their situation to them. They are all there because they are in huge amounts of debt, and they all agree to come here of their own free will to play a game for money, just like they did before when they were invited. The organisers of the Squid Game even know exactly how much money each person owes, and lets them know they are all in the same boat, and they are all there of their own free will. They are then told that they are here to play a series of 6 games over 6 days for money, and the money increases each time a player is eliminated. The money is represented in cash in a giant pig money box hanging over the hall. Every time a contestant is eliminated, more money falls into the pig through a chute in the roof, and the exact amount is shown on a giant digital number board. Each player is worth 100 million won, which is about £62,000 or $84,000. There are 456 players, so the total possible prize money is 45,600,000,000 won, which is approximately £28 million or $38 million, which is an extremely tempting amount of money, even if you are very well off, let alone if you're on the edge of losing everything. They are then told that to join the game, they have to sign a consent form, which they all do, after which the first game begins and they all troop off to the playing ground, which is an indoor space painted to look like a big field. At one end stands a giant doll, and they are told that they will be playing a game called Red Light, Green Light. It is a classic game which has many different names depending on where you grow up, but the idea is when the giant doll is looking at the players, they have to stay still, red light. And when the doll looks away, you can run toward it, green light. The stakes of the game become horribly clear to the players when the first person to be caught moving after red light is called is shot. At first, no one is sure what has happened, but when a second person is shot, it causes a panic, and half of the players start running around trying to escape, but there is nowhere to go, and they are eliminated in gruesome, bloody fashion. The rest, who are smart enough to realise that panicking is not a good survival trait, make it through the game and head back to the sleeping hall. Here, they are confronted by the reality of what they have agreed to be part of, and the weaker-willed people start begging and pleading to be allowed to leave. A square mask tells them the rules they have agreed to in the consent form, which many appear to have not read. The rules are: 1. A player is not allowed to stop playing. 2. A player who refuses to play will be eliminated. And 3. Games may be terminated if the majority agrees. The players sensibly choose to stop the game, but the game organizer tells them that the game will only be paused, and that they will be given another chance to play at a later date. After returning to their miserable lives, 187 out of the 201 players that were left chose to return and try their luck at the money, even though they knew that the penalty of failure is death. It is not a surprise that people would rather put themselves at risk for the possibility of becoming rich beyond what the average imagination can conjure. Many of them are probably in the same boat as the main character Seong-gyun, who has been forced to sign away parts of his body to pay for his debts, or possibly even worse, depending on their creditors. The main characters of this series are a very different and interesting bunch. All of them have different stories and different reasons for finding themselves playing Squid Game. I already gave you the lowdown on the main character, Seong-gyun, and there isn't much more to say about him other than he is a caring and somewhat emotional guy, who in the real world would not harm a fly if he could help it. Next, we have the previously mentioned North Korean defector Kang Sae-byuk, who is playing to save her mother from the horrors of living under the crazy North Korean regime, but to do this she put her brother in an orphanage while she tries to make enough money to save their mum. To make the amount of money she needs, she has been living a life of crime. She is tough and willing to put her life on the line for her cause, even if it means abandoning her brother to an uncertain future. She is very much a loner and not accustomed to trusting people. Next, we have the smart and savvy Cho Sang-woo, who is from the same neighbourhood, who is an acquaintance of Seong-gyun, their mothers are friends. Cho Sang-woo is famous in his hometown for being clever enough to go to Seoul University and become a commodities broker. But it turns out that Cho Sang-woo is actually a calculating survivor who will stop at nothing, even throwing friends under the bus if it will get him just one step further towards success. Now, let's talk about Jang Dok-soo, a mafia member who got himself into trouble with his boss because he stole a lot of money, and not just from his boss but from his other gang members, making him persona non grata to the point where even the person he thought he could trust tried to have him killed. He is violent, hard, cruel, caring only for himself and using everyone else as either a shield or a tool. He is also a previous boss of Kang Sae-byuk, who used to work for him and who he has a lot of enmity against for leaving to go her own way. Then we have a random Pakistani named Abdul Ali, who has had the bad fortune to work for a really terrible boss who refused to pay him for months, leading to him being in debt and desperate to provide for his family. He really doesn't belong here. He is strong, but his trusting and simple nature make him an easy target for some of the cold-hearted survivors taking part in Squid Game. You know, sometimes you meet people that appear normal, but the longer you spend with them, you realise that they're a bit odd. And then you spend even longer with them, and it turns out they're simply crazy, and that being odd and quirky was just a cover for a complete mental case. Well, that is our next player, Han Min-yo. She will do whatever it takes to survive. She will manipulate, beg, accuse, even sexual favours if it will get her just a little further. She has obviously had a pretty tough life, and whether she started crazy or went crazy through a lack of emotional support in her life would require a whole program to itself, and I for one would pay to watch it. And in an unlikely turn of events, since you would expect most of the people playing Squid Game to be at least able-bodied, as most of Squid Game is fairly active, but Oh-il Nam, an old-age pensioner, is also here, playing for his family because he has a brain tumour and knows he doesn't have long left to live. He turns out to be better at the games than his age and mental fitness would suggest, and strikes up a friendship with Seong-gyun. There is also a side story about a police detective who is searching for his missing brother, which is interesting because it gives us a view of what it is like for the people working at Squid Games, but it doesn't really advance the story of what is happening to the players themselves and remains unresolved at the end of the series, leaving us in dire need of a sequel to find out what happens. Although a sequel will no doubt end up making it feel like The Hunger Games, in that the sequel is just the first movie all over again, and that makes a policeman a very important person because he will be needed to advance the plot outside of the Squid Game itself. If you look for it, you can find huge amounts of symbology in Squid Games, from the Illuminati to communist overtones, to a battle of the sexes, which of course is no battle at all, because women are simply no match for men in a physical contest, which one of the games in Squid Game highlights very starkly, and with an honesty that is very rare here in the West, where gender roles have become so corrupted that some women are starting to forget that they are not on an equal footing with men in all areas. The symbology I found staring us most starkly in the face was how modern Western philosophy of free markets and equal opportunities in a meritocratic society are the pinnacle of what we as a species can hope for at this moment in time. What I mean by this is that at the start of Squid Game, everybody is at the same level, almost like a communist country. But as the game continues, a hierarchy of skills becomes apparent. Some people are clever, some are more experienced, some people are fitter, some are stronger, some are more brutal, and so on and so on. Certain traits are suited to certain games. It's just like real life, and those with an advantage in one game will get ahead, but they may be at a disadvantage in another game. So if you can encompass a mix of enough traits and skills, even if you aren't the strongest in any one of them, you have a higher likelihood of succeeding. And so Squid Game becomes a pyramid of success, just like real life. And while not everyone is equal, because in real life people are simply not equal, they still all get a chance to try and succeed. And just like in real life, some can't get off that bottom step, while others make it a quarter of the way up, still others will get halfway, and a lucky few will make it all the way to the top. And there is still always a chance that you may fall off. But the higher you get, the less likely it is that you'll fall all the way back to the bottom, although it can happen, and has in spectacular style on occasion. Squid Games is not an original concept. The whole game of death thing has been done many times in many different ways. Even Jean-Claude Van Damme has done it in Hard Target, a great movie you should check out if you haven't already. But Squid Games is special in how much it manages to make you care for the characters, giving them a real feel of presence and not making them feel as though they are expendable. In conclusion, watch Squid Game. It is absolutely worth your time. I watched the English dubbed version, and I've watched a bit of the original language version, and I prefer the dubbed one. It felt kind of like the old dubbed kung fu movies, which was a lot of fun. Although I do usually prefer to watch things in the original language. I cannot recommend this series more highly. It is far superior to anything I have seen come out of Hollywood in the last few years, and I'm looking forward to seeing what happens next, if Series 2 comes around, which I'm sure it will. But I warn you, if you watch this series, Episode 6 will break your heart. I'm still not sure I'm over it, and if that isn't the sign of a great program, I really don't know what is. This has been Movies Suck, appreciating just how good TV can be when it doesn't have the grubby hands of the pink hair brigade drooling all over it. Signing out. Leave a like, share, subscribe, and I will catch you guys on the flip side.